Maine saname timamvana saname timamva Maine
Thank you everyone for joining us. Takulandilani pano PAKACHERE. You are here with us on our podcast PAKACHERE, where we discuss issues that are impacting us in our daily lives here in the UK and in Malawi. And this is a space where we discuss issues. We engage with one another, we support one another, we look at how do we solve problems that we're seeing in our local communities and in practice, and we want to welcome you into this space. And today we have an absolute honor because we've got an exciting session for you. You are with me, Sala, and my colleague,
Charity
Charity.
Gladstone.
Yes, welcome everyone. Now, Charity, do you want to just give us a brief overview of why we're here today before I even introduce our speaker today?
Okay.
Why are we here today?
Right. I'll start with a brief introduction of myself again. My name is Charity Gladstone. I'm the president of Malawian UK Nurses Association, also known as MUNA. MUNA is a professional association which brings together Malawian nurses, midwives, healthcare professionals working in United Kingdom. Our purpose is to connect, support, empower, mentor our members through professional development, leadership, networking, collective advocacy. And we are passionate about contributing health and well-being both here in the UK, globally, and back home, Malawi. So today we're having a very important conversation in recognition of World Elder Abuse Day, which takes place every year in June. So this year it's on the 15th of June. And this day reminds us that elder people across the world continue to experience abuse, neglect, exploitation, isolation, and often in silence, in the safest places, with the people probably that they should trust most, but also they fail to raise these issues. So as Mona, this topic matters to us deeply because in Malawi culture, we respect our elders, our parents, our grandparents, carers, community leaders, storytellers, and they are knowledge holders. They're the foundation of our many families. But respect must go beyond words. So it must be seen how we protect elder people, how we listen to them, and how we support them as a family. So this conversation is important because elder care is not only a family issue, it is a safeguarding issue, it is a legal issue, it is a human rights issue, and it's of community responsibility and interest. So this is why, as Mona, we are talking about it today. And as you've said, Salah, we're truly, truly honored to have to hear from Judge Zione Ntaba from the legal perspective, and also Tidziwe from the through the academic lens. So good to have you all here.
Thanks, Charity. I think, yeah, for setting that in context. I want to sort of introduce our speakers this evening, whether it's evening or morning, wherever you are. I want to introduce firstly Justice Zione Ntaba. Once again, as Charity said, Zione Ntaba is a judge, a High Court judge in Malawi, and she's currently joining us live from Malawi. Zione, say hi. Oh, we've got you on mute. We've got you on mute.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. We understand
Thank
you're in a
you.
little bit of darkness at the moment, but thank you so much for
We
joining
are
us.
experiencing your usual blackouts, as always.
Well, despite the blackouts, Judge Zione Ntaba has decided to join us. So just a little bit background about Zione. So Zione presides over cases at the High Court in Zomba, Registry, which is in the Eastern Judicial Region of Malawi. And she began her journey at the Ministry of Justice as a persecutor, civil litigator, and legislative draft person. And she also assumed the first Director of Legal Affairs and Board Secretary position at the Malawi Energy Regulator Authority. And I'm going to pin it in there that Zione, I think was it in 2015, was one of the first nine female judges in Malawi. So that is it's a feat that we're all very proud of as Malawians that she's standing in that space for
Woohoo!
women, definitely. And one is particularly passionate about issues concerning human rights, gender, children, disability rights, climate justice, technology, and health. And furthermore, Zwone's expertise and commitments are recognized through her participation on several boards, committees, and organizations in Malawi and Africa, which includes the Women Judges Association of Malawi, the Justice Advocacy in Africa, Judicial Action Group, the African Judges Forum on AIDS, HIV, Human Rights and the Law, the African chapter of the International Association of Refugees and Migration Judges, Economic Association of Malawi, which is ECAMA, and the Disability HIV and AIDS Trust. And on top of that, Zione has been on a lot of platforms globally. So whether it's on with WHO, UNICEF, she's highly recognized and respected globally. So Zione, takulandilani, zikomo kwambiri.
Zikomo. Okay, so I've got a pleasure of introducing my friend, Tidziwe. I've known Tidziwe for a long time, and probably I reveal my age because I know Tidziwe, she's my classmate, because I'm always the youngest, right? So I will introduce Tidziwe. I'll let Tidziwe introduce herself and also to just give us a bit of context on the work that you are doing, Tidziwe. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Charity and Sarah, for inviting me to speak today. It's a huge honor to just showcase some of the work that I'm doing in terms of care of the older adults and those living with dementia as well. So everyone knows I'm a registered nurse. That's why I'm on this platform today, speaking on behalf of my professional background. And when I look at my professional side of things, most of it is linked with my passion for care of the older adults. Just so passionate. I think everyone, everywhere, wherever I go, whether in my family, whether in church, whether in work, whether with my students, or whether on the ward, everyone knows how passionate I am. And this passion has originated mainly from my training as a registered nurse. But in that training, when I came to the UK, I noticed that I lacked something in there. So I found something new, a new passion in the UK. And I came across nursing homes, which I was really fascinated with. And I thought, oh, this is nice because we don't have this in Malawi. So to me, it was a totally new concept. So I got really interested in that. And so what I've done is I've really progressed in terms of that work. So I did start working as a carer, just like everyone else when we first arrived in the UK. And I really loved my job. And very quickly, I was promoted to a care manager. Then I got my registration with the UK Nursing and Midwifery Council. And I got my PIN number and worked in the same setting as a registered nurse. Then because of the passion I had, I quickly got promoted to work as a nursing home manager. So on that level, I was really involved in care and I loved the job that I did. And then I worked after the nursing homes, I progressed. I worked as a nurse assessor in our local health board here in Wales. And a nurse assessor, one of the roles is involved with nursing homes. So I was still looking for jobs that involve nursing homes. Anything I do involves nursing homes. So I worked supporting care in nursing homes, supporting staff, making sure that standards of care are being met adequately and appropriately as well. And then moving on from there, I've started working in one of the local universities as a lecturer, and anything that involves nursing, everyone says, Ted, I'm like, yes, I can do it. So most of the subjects I teach are around care of the older adult and care of people living with dementia as well, both in community settings as well as in acute settings. And I also teach person-centered care, and I also teach global health nursing. That's why I'm on this platform as well, doing a lot of work with other areas apart from the UK, including Malawi. And in 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 terms of student support as well, I'm a link lecturer for nursing homes. So most of my the areas I deal with are nursing homes where I support student placements as well. So you can see I've got that vast experience in this area on top of my passion and professional qualification.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's
really
where,
good to, it's
yeah.
really good. What a great depth of experience to have that, I would say, double vision
Yeah.
or double lens to see from
Yeah.
the academic side, but also from your work experience. So it's really, really great to have you here. Over to you, Salah.
I think before we go into the work that you're doing, let me just go to Zwane. I'm just going to ask a question. So we know that globally, apparently, I think this is UNDP. They say that 1 in 6 people who are aged over 60, they experience some form of abuse each year, that which is affecting more than 140 million older people worldwide, which is spotlighting that this is a global problem. Now, in Malawi in particular, reports have shown that more than 300 older people have been killed since 2015. Now, these are the reported ones
Mm.
due to accusations of witchcraft alone. That's just in relation to witchcraft. And there's been cases of abuse have been rising recent years. And just keeping this in mind, what does elder abuse look like within the Malawian context? And why do you think older people, in particular women, remain so vulnerable in our communities?
Before before
Okay.
Judge comes in, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask the question that
Mm,
Mm.
what counts as elder abuse?
Okay. All right. So maybe let me always start from this perspective that when you look at the concept of elder abuse, it's always couched in the concept of human rights violations. Everybody, as we stand now, has all sorts of rights, whether it's the right to life, the right of equality, right to that discrimination, right to freedom of movement, right to not be tortured. So when you look at elder abuse, you're looking at the concept of when you look at in the Malawi context, you've already highlighted one very critical one that Salah will come back to. But you look at physical violence. There's a lot of physical violence that goes on. Elderly are beaten, they are assaulted, without the context of witchcraft in the
Mm,
homes, either by their caregivers or even sometimes by us, their family as well. There's a lot of emotional abuse. There's a
Mm.
lot of humiliation. There's a lot of isolation. You find that you go into spaces, elderly are so isolated that they are by themselves. And if you look at the Older Persons Act, anybody above the age of 60 is considered an elderly person under the laws of Malawi. There's a lot of economic exploitation.
Mm.
People are dispossessed of their property. There's denial sometimes of even pensions because they don't remember certain things or they can't keep a hold of some of their documentation. You have the biggest aspect that we have is also the neglect.
Mm.
Neglect is there where a lot of elderly are not looked after, cared for in terms of food provision, medical care, shelter. So that's the kind of abuse you can find around Malawi in terms of elderly abuse. And when it comes to physical violence, we're talking about the fact that a lot of times there's this ideology of witchcraft
Mm.
and they're murdered. And most times, as Salah said, it's women because I do not understand whether it's in the African context, whether it's in the Asian context, even in the um, Caucasian context, it always seems witchcraft is associated with women. I don't know that stereotypical ideology that witchcraft is always women. And because of that, women are the most affected in terms of elderly, when in terms of physical violence and murder when it comes to abuse, because they're the ones who outlive most of the times the men. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they are witches, but there are more elderly women out there than there are elderly men, because women tend to outlive men most times. So you find that dichotomy of abuse happening more frequent for women, and that stereotypical ideology that they're witches because of that. And so it's couched in a very difficult light when you think about it, especially when you look at the concept as you grow older. There's certain fundamental issues that change. The inability of us to understand why a person, like a woman, is considered a witch because she was found outside naked. The fact that she's elderly, she might have dementia. She might have some sort of mental health deterioration that has happened, and to that extent, she's unable to actually be in the cognitive state to understand what she's doing. So when they find her outside, oh, she's naked, or she's wandering out in the middle of the night, she's a witch. But it has nothing to do with that, but it has everything to do with age. So the understanding of elder abuse very much goes to the cultural beliefs. It also goes to us in not understanding the social aspects, but also the fundamental one is not understanding what aging is, because aging comes with it all sorts of issues. And I say that because Sarah might not remember, but I did nursing before I went to do law school. So these are things, yeah, I just didn't finish. I left, did not tell you about window, as they say. But so from that context, so when we deal with human rights and health and aging, you're looking at it from that perspective. So when you look at elder abuse, you're looking from those particular angles, and you're looking at the violations that are coming through and noticing that this is happening more often in Malawi than we thought of.
Now, I think just as a follow on that, where you say this is happening more often, is it because it's happening more often, or is it because Malawi has made important progress? So with things like the Older Persons Act of 2024, or now that people are calling it out, and people are speaking about it, is it that it's happening more often, or is it because now people are shedding a light on it? How can the law really effectively protect our older persons in the context where, like you say, it's deeply rooted in beliefs, and and these beliefs continue to drive violence?
I think it's I can say it's more often. It's more often now because it's more out there, because social media has made it easier to see the kind of
Hmm.
abuse that's happening. I think minus social media, everybody things used to happen. The only time you would hear it is on Five Mobile. For Five Mobile, if it actually reported it, it might be competing with other issues. But I
Hmm.
think the fact that we understand it more now as an issue, as a human rights violation, is also something that is very fundamental. The fact that people are understanding what the laws are. Because for you to understand a violation, you have to understand that somebody has a right, and that right is being violated. So
Hmm.
for us understanding that elderly people have rights too, their rights don't go because they're aged. Everyone's rights remain until the day we die. So I
Hmm.
think that ideology, that there's more civic or legal literacy going on. That's why you're seeing more people understanding what elder abuse is, more people reporting it. But it needs to go beyond just that availability of the laws. It has to inculcate. We need to be able to do a mindset shift, especially around aging witchcraft and the stereotypes that go around that. Because as long as we have this stereotypical and cultural belief that the more, if you're aged, it means you are now a witch. That's
Hmm.
where the biggest problem is. If you
Hmm.
look at the concept of witchcraft, if you look at the concept of the other emotional abuse, it has to go with what coping mechanisms do people have. Because the more elderly you are, the more need and care you need. So as people who are carers at that point, you need to have coping mechanisms that make you understand and help help you cope with dealing with a mother who used to be cognitive but now cannot is not the same person, forgets forgets where she was sleeping, wanders off. You're dealing with all that. So the emotional abuse is not necessarily sometimes very intrinsic in you, but it comes because of circumstances. So having to have coping mechanisms that help people understand that if you're dealing with aged people, if you're going to deal with elderly people, they have to be mechanisms put in place for you to deal with that in terms of their care and need. So I think there's a lot of it's a multi-faceted approach to dealing with issues. The legal empowerment is necessary. The structures and the social structures that need to come in for dealing with aged people need to come in, both for the family unit as well as the community unit, which is what I think the Older Persons Act is underscoring, that communities need to put into place structures and systems that take care of elderly people and understand this dichotomy, the knowledge that needs to go with that. So I think when we look at it from that perspective, it will help. And lastly, dealing away with the harmful social, religious, and practices that we currently have around people that are aged. We need to have systems that actually programs that take that away, because as long as those harmful practices exist, we'll continue to have elder abuse. So we need to have systematic programs that actually target that, whether it's at government level, at local government level, which is your districts, and whether it's at church. We all need to be doing programs that actually take away those harmful practices that actually are fueling the abuse.
I absolutely love how you have already stepped into, well, how can we tackle this issue? We know it's an issue, we know it's happening, and it's about what can we put within our systems, within our communities, within our homes, and how can we educate ourselves so that we can safeguard our older people. Now, one of the things that you highlighted is that abuse tends to happen mostly in the communities. People that you trust would tend to abuse the elderly, and
Yeah.
that's where abuse tends to be prevalent. But one of the things that we've highlighted and have seen, I think globally, it states that 2 in 3 staff in studies, so these are people, healthcare individuals, whether you're a nurse or a doctor, 2 in 3 staff in some studies admit to abusive behaviors towards elderly people. Now, that is where the massive, for me, that's where crime, that is a big crime, that as healthcare
Yes.
professionals, we are actually perpetuating that abuse
Mhm.
instead of caring. Our job is to care and to look after all our patients, irrespective whether you're a baby or you're elderly, but it seems to be a lot
Yeah.
more prevalent within the elderly. Now, I want to sort of go to Tidziwe. Charity, I know you've got a question to Tidziwe when we talk about the elderly, and to sort of touch on some of the work that you're doing around dementia, isn't it?
Yeah, so I my question to Tidziwe, I just wanted to give it a bit of a context, but you've covered it. Judge Zione has covered it, and you've also covered it, Sala, in your introduction, because the WHO reports that dementia is one of the major causes of disability and dependency among older people globally,
Yeah.
with about 50 million people living with dementia at the time in 2021, and probably even more now, and more than 60% in low and middle income countries. So, with this background or backdrop at Tidziwe, my question to you was, what does the growing global burden of dementia mean for countries like Malawi, where formal care systems may be limited? Because Judge Zione has really dissected all the forms of abuse that might be there in
Yeah.
terms of economic, emotional, um, um, physical. There's so many nuances to this. But what does the growing global burden of dementia mean for countries like Malawi?
So what I'll do is I'll flip this question. I'll answer it still at the end, but what I'll do is I'll look at writing from what Judge Zone has said, is why are people with dementia more vulnerable? Why? Or why are people living with dementia, or older people? Why are they vulnerable? Why are they susceptible to all these forms of abuse? So the first one is, as Judge Ntaba said, it's the increase in dependency because of the aging process. They are aging. They are getting much more dependent on others. So when that happens, the person who is looking after this individual there's an automatic power imbalance there, because the person now takes the person caring for this individual takes control of that individual, and they overlook all the care, what choices they have. So that individual's rights are impacted in a way, or they are prevented from actually expressing themselves, from talking. And the other thing is, when you look at, because it's different when you look at older people and people living with dementia, because it doesn't mean that when someone's aged, that means they will be cognitively impaired. But when people are aging, plus having the condition, having dementia, then it does double the impact. It does double the problem, because you're talking about someone who lacks capacity,
Yeah.
who is cognitively impaired to a point that they can't recognize abuse, they can't recognize inappropriate behavior, or they can recognize it but they can't report it, or they've got communication problems that even if they recognize it and they know it's inappropriate, but they're unable to express themselves or to report it. So then it becomes a problem. It becomes a big problem. And when you look at people living with dementia as well, you find that most of them, they have behavioral problems. They could be hitting out, they could be biting, stripping their clothes, doing things that people may not regard as normal behavior. That alone, to the family, it may be like embarrassing, and people may be hidden away because, oh, she's embarrassing, or I can't take her to church because she's so embarrassing, or he's embarrassing. So as a consequence, you find that people, they are hidden away, they are locked away, and by being isolated socially, they cannot report when they are being abused. So they've been cut away from the community. But also looking at that behavioral problem, you're looking at when people are looking after people in Malawi where they are not trained to manage such type of challenging behavior. So it's not intentional that they want to be abused, but they are overwhelmed by that type of behavior. So you find examples like inappropriate restraint, where people are actually tied down to a bed because they don't want them to wander about, or people are over sedated so that they sleep all day so that they don't cause problems. Or maybe they are when people are going out, you find that they are shut away and people go attend social events and leaving them alone in this house. And that causes them to deteriorate even more because they are not being socially stimulated, and then that becomes a bigger problem. And then coming back to your question, then what is the burden on populations like Malawi, where services are already limited or underdeveloped? So the first is looking at on the personal, more personal or family level impact, and then looking at the government level or community level. So looking at personally, dementia does put a big burden on families, because fancy looking after someone when you've got no knowledge, you've got no resources. Malawi is already a poor country, developing country, where most of the families don't have the resources. So even if they want to look after someone, they are not able to. Then let alone they are not trained to care appropriated for this individual. So in those cases, that's where unintentional abuse happens, unintentional neglect happens because of lack of resources, lack of support. And then you find that these families haven't been trained, and then they're spending their whole time looking after this individual. And as Zione has said, it's mostly women. And look at the role of a woman in a Malawian context. So you're stuck looking after this older or person with maybe challenging behavior, who can't be left alone. And at the same time, a husband is calling you, oh, can I have Nsima, please? I'm hungry. Then a child needs to be taken to school. Then you need to do it's those multiple responsibilities. Then they become so overwhelmed. And in the end, you find that people are not well looked after because of that impact. And then at the same time, imagine in an already poor family, you're spending most of your time looking after this person who is unwell, and then at the same time you can't go to the market to continue with your income generating activities. So it is like a vicious cycle, is it? So it's like it just complicates the issue to say, you know what, we can't even eat, we are already poor, but I can't leave you because I have to look after you. Where do we get the money from? So you can see the big impact on the families. And as such, sometimes you find arguments in families, even families breaking down because people can't cope. They leave, they can't handle it. So there's a huge impact on areas like those. And then when you look at the government level, think about Malawi. It's got a very, very poor healthcare service in terms of geriatric care doesn't exist. It's not, it's very underdeveloped. No nursing home, no long-term care facilities in Malawi. We are beginning to hear about it. That's part of the work that we are doing and we're trying to encourage. So, and then there are no diagnostic facilities as well to detect this condition earlier so that people can start being supported much earlier. No provision of things like advanced care planning where people can express their wishes and preferences. No, that impedes on the individual rights as well. So people are not given that right, human right to say, you can do what you want. Tell me, how would you like to be cared for? There's no facility. So even if they say what they want, but there's no provision because there are no such facilities. People are dumped in a general ward where they are even more confused. Nurses are not trained. Even when you look at the curriculum, it doesn't involve or incorporate me and you, Charity. We trained at Kamuzu College of Nursing. Then my curriculum didn't involve care of people living with dementia. I came here, it was a totally new concept. So embedding that those ideas or those concepts into the curriculum gives that education. So it's the services. The service is poor. The impact is overwhelmed. The services are already overwhelmed. And then the growing numbers of dementia, as you can see on the statistics, they are impacting because people used to say there's no dementia in Malawi, but there is dementia in Malawi. People are becoming more and more aware, but there are
Yeah.
no services. So
And
I can say,
mm,
yeah, lack of specialist services as well. And yeah, so that causes delays in care as well. And then people are deteriorating even more. And then the system is being overwhelmed because sometimes when the families are overwhelmed, they take the individuals to the hospital, overwhelming acute care services as well.
Mm.
So that's where it becomes a big challenge.
I
yeah,
was just
you
going to
have really
say,
unpacked it very
yeah.
well,
Mm.
Tidziwe. And what's really struck with me is how you've unpacked the the voice because of maybe cognition,
Yeah,
that capacity,
yeah,
the stigma that you've articulated very well, and also probably, safeguarding something that probably we did not do very well. They're trying to do it these days, but we did not do it very well in Malawi. And also what really, really struck the chord is that for us who trained in Malawi, we learned a lot of pathophysiology of so many things, but not dementia, absolutely not dementia. And that's huge for me because
Mm.
education is key. Because if a nurse,
mhm,
somebody who goes to university, does not learn about dementia,
mm,
do you think, of course, we all made with we've got our belief system. So do
yeah.
you think if a neighbor, an elderly neighbor, a 90-something-year-old neighbor who's seeing things on the wall or at night, who's hallucinating in the day, and kids or somebody say they're witches,
Mm.
all the education goes out of the window because I haven't learned about dementia.
Mhm.
So therefore, my default is just to revert back to what I know best. So you have unpacked that so well. That lack of specialists, it's coming now. Things are changing, but you've unpacked it very well. Over to you, Sala.
Thanks.
I think I just wanted to highlight why this topic is really, really important. We are not talking about an abstract concept. This is impacting us in our homes. I mean, I've got an older mom, she's 86, and people are already accusing her of being a witch. Why is she living longer than my dad did? My grandmother lived until her 90s and she died with people saying that.
Yeah.
And also, the people who perpetuate violence. I mean, I had a family member who pulled a knife on my mom, you
Oh.
know. And so this is not an abstract concept. It's about how are we protecting our own in our home.
Mm.
Now, you've talked a lot about some of the things that are lacking in Malawi around education, around systems, around the healthcare systems and the structure. I think I want to put this into context. In the UK, we do have a healthcare system that provides support. We've got safeguarding laws, we've got the Human Rights Act law, and the care laws where we
Uh,
are protecting our elderly.
yeah,
I know,
Health
health,
and Social Care Act.
Mm.
exactly. So we have so many acts and so many laws that are in place in terms of protecting the elderly,
Yeah.
and yet abuse is still perpetuating.
Yeah.
And our healthcare professionals are trained. I've been trained here. I learned about dementia. I learned about how do you care for the elderly. And yet, like I was saying, those figures are saying 2 out of 3. We're still being violent. As healthcare professionals, we are perpetuating that abuse. So it speaks to something much deeper, much deeper and fundamental about who we are as a people.
Yeah.
What is it about aging that Zione highlighted? There is something about ageism that as a people we seem to fight against and we find to be very difficult. And this is important for us because our members in Muna, I think about 60% of our members are over the age of 50, 45, 50. And that means we will be retiring. Whether I'm putting myself in that category, I'm not saying, but they will be retiring. We are having conversations around where do I go in the next 20 years in terms of retirement? Do I stay here? Do I go home? And then we've had stories of at least two people that we know who are nurses who have gone home, worked very hard, built a nice home, but have been killed by their own family members because of that financial abuse. So the question for me now is, what can we do?
Mm.
I want to put this question to Zione. What role do the courts play in enforcing the rights of older persons and ensuring there's some level of accountability to perpetrators? I don't know if Zione, you can hear me, if you're still there.
Still here. The fights are finally back.
Oh, congratulations. We've got lights back. Mawanti.
And there was light.
And there was light in Malawi. This is our reality. This is our reality. Yeah. So that question, yes. So what role is what role do the courts play in enforcing the rights, of older people? Is it me or have we
So the good thing about no,
I think Zone is frozen.
Okay, we'll give her a moment. We'll give her a moment.
Okay,
Okay,
dropped out.
we'll try.
Okay.
Yeah, she'll
But
drop.
while Zoni has dropped out, I will
Mhm.
pose this question. I don't know. I'm pretty sure with this was going to I was going to pose this question to both Zioni and Tiziwe. So while you're here, I just wanted to ask about how do we create communities where older people, with what you unpacked, I'm following up from what you've unpacked, including those living with dementia, are protected by law. I know you're not a law specialist, but something that's understood by families. and supported by the health system so that they're treated with dignity.
Yeah. Thank you, Charity. I feel it all starts with dementia awareness. I feel like when you look at the Malawian context now with the growing social media, the awareness messages are there. People are beginning to understand what constitutes abuse. But as Judge Zione said, it is quite complex. Abuse is very complex because it can happen willfully and unwillfully, knowingly or unknowingly. And sometimes it may happen just because it's situational where people are exposed or they don't have resources or they don't have their right training, they don't have knowledge or skills. So it starts with understanding what is dementia.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting because I did a blog for Dementia UK a while back, about 2 years ago, where we talked about dementia awareness, because we may think it's only in Malawi where dementia awareness is so poor, but it is across the globe. When I look at global nursing that I'm involved with in my university, you find that it's a global concern. It's not just in Malawi. So it starts with understanding. So different communities are doing different initiatives to understand what is happening. Like in Japan, they had an initiative where they started with changing just the mindset, changing the name, because sometimes people are called like demented or
Yeah. So what do they call it in Japan?
so in Japan, it used to be called something like Nanchisho, which meant something meaningless. So they had to name it in a way that it's meaningful, something that shows that it's a cognitive condition, it's a cognitive ability, a disability. Whereas in Malawi, we don't even have a name up to now. I was talking to EGAF, a staff at EGAF Care Foundation this week, and said they asked me for some information. I gave them. So they said, "Oh, Mom, what do we say dementia is? We are trying to educate people, and they are calling it all sorts." So it starts with simple initiatives like designing a name, because how do we expect to understand something that doesn't have a name?
Yeah, you have to name it, isn't it?
Yeah,
You have to
we
name
have to
it
name it.
to
So
name it,
that's where it will start.
confine it.
Yeah. And then looking at maybe our actions should aim at maybe increasing understanding of dementia as a condition, not witchcraft, reducing stigma, and maybe looking at early recognition, supporting people to understand how do we pick what are the symptoms of dementia, what are the early symptoms, picking those early as possible so that care or support services can be initiated as early as possible. And the main thing is collaborative approach, like we've done now,
Yeah.
because me alone cannot conquer the world, but different organizations working together. Like today, we've got Muna, we've got Us Enrich, we've got the university, you've got staff, and you've got maybe care facilities, you've got maybe acute care settings, all of us coming together, joining hands and tackling this from all the perspectives, because causes of abuse are varied. So if it's a multi-agency and a multidisciplinary approach, you find that different areas are addressed at the same time and people are working together. And as you said, it's knowledge. Knowledge is power. It's that education, very key, starts from everybody, right from the family ground to the top level, the policymakers. Everyone needs to be aware of what this condition is, what is the impact, why is it a problem, why is it a global concern, and looking at practical, cultural sensitive actions. Like when you look at Malawi, we can't do actions that we do in the UK, but look at the Malawian context. What can we do that is practical? Things like involving the healthcare surveillance assistance in these awareness messages, involving traditional leaders. 2 days ago, we had Nkosi Amakosi visiting EGAF. We are involving him to to pass those awareness messages. And he has invited people from EGAF and other elder care facilities or providers to work with him when he has a meeting, embed those messages within those meetings. Don't do just, oh, today we are talking about dementia. But if they're doing other types of campaigns, embed that message. Say, okay, while we are talking about this, there's also so and so to talk to us about dementia. So using already existing platforms to give these key messages. And as we already say, embedding dementia into curriculums, starting from standard 1 until university, even at PhD level. As you asked me, Charity, what are you doing? Research, involving people in research. I'm currently a PhD student looking at dementia again in my passion. So I'm looking at end of life care for people, looking at registered nurses' experiences of caring for people with living with dementia at the end of life in nursing homes. But we are looking at UK, but we can do similar research in Malawi, saying what are the experiences of family givers? What is the research?
Yeah,
What is
absolutely.
the research underpinning this? So it's the education using existing platforms like Facebook, Instagram, or the radio, TV to pass these awareness messages. And involving families as well in this, not just educating us to be on that platform, but going from the grassroots, using families to educate other family members.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
that's so you looking at it from what I was talking over the weekend, systems link.
yeah, yeah.
So systems lens. So looking at the family, looking at the community, who are the key stakeholders, but all of us, because through our patterns, interactions, we produce the behavior. Awesome. Over to you, Sala, for Judge Zione.
Thank you. I think before I ask Zione a question, just to let people know that, and this is a podcast. If you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. We will have a webinar next week where we can engage our audience. We'll take your questions. We can pull that, your queries much more further. What we're doing today is setting the groundwork, having a conversation about what does the landscape look like in Malawi and what does the landscape look like here? And then we can have a much more in-depth and robust discussion on the webinar. So apologies to those if you've got something that's burning. So please hold on to that because that means you'll come back to us. So thank you for that. And Zione, welcome back into the space. I think when the lights came on, it flipped
Yeah, when the
everything.
lights came on, everything went haywire.
Oh, well, I'm gonna go back to the question that I asked
Question,
before
yes.
you went off. Yes, and I know Charity sort of
Yeah.
pulled that, and that's what Zee was answering around the role that different groups and different teams can play. And I'm very interested in what role the courts, the laws can actually play in the rights of older people
Yeah.
and ensuring that there is accountability in protecting them.
Let me speak from 4 different angles. When I look at the law, I think the biggest aspect, I keep going back to this, that legal empowerment is very necessary. Because if you tell people and educate them and make them understand that there are laws that exist and in these laws there are rights. Because each and every one of us has rights. And one of the biggest fundamental rights that we have is the right to life. But also another big fundamental right is the issue of dignity, human dignity, umuntu. I think sometimes we really forget how much the concept of umuntu is in the concept of human rights and especially when you're dealing with people that don't necessarily have the ability to deal with themselves in the way they used to deal with themselves. So I think from that perspective, we have a major aspect of really helping educate the masses around the concept of what the law says and what it is when it comes to violations. And it's violations whether it's in the home, in the schools, and sometimes yes, because these people will be part of the system. They'll either be in elderly literacy classes or whichever schools they or whichever education systems we put them. They'll be in hospitals. They'll be yes, in Malawi, we only have currently two nursing homes or in those spaces, in the communities, in churches, in mosques. So we need to be able to give them the legal knowledge that says these are rights and these are human rights violations when it comes to
Yeah.
the elderly. That's the first thing. And as a court, if those rights are violated, whether in the civil space, we have the ability to deal with them from the civil space as well as the criminal space. If you assault anybody, you hit anybody, you murder anybody, the law should take its course. Those matters need to be reported, people need to be arrested and prosecuted accordingly and sent to prison. In the civil space, and I think a lot of times people forget there's a lot more in the civil space. A person who has been abused can also sue the person who has abused them in the civil space and get compensation for their treatment of their medical treatment, their mental health treatment, even just compensation for the fact that they've been abused by this person. Whether it's, as I said, whether it's in the home, whether it's in the hospital, those opportunities still exist. And that's what the courts can do. Then you also have the Malawi Human Rights Commission, which also plays a very fundamental aspect when it comes to human rights promotion, as well as investigating systemic abuse. Because one of the things that you will see with the Older Persons Act is the ability that we should start inspecting these spaces where old people are. So if that is going to come through, then there will be systemic abuse investigations that have to happen in the hospitals. What kind of system? Remember, there was a time somebody there was they did a systemic abuse on persons with albinism. They can do the same thing for older persons. So they form a very fundamental aspect in terms of ensuring that they help in terms of the legal aspects. And the final one is the ombudsman. My sister works with the ombudsman, and they work in the hospitals. There is a hospital ombudsman almost I think in all the major hospitals, which are supposed to take in human rights violations as well and patient violations. So making sure that people understand that these systems are available and they actually work for people's rights, especially when those are being violated, including a person who is aged, who most times won't be able to report it, but you can report it as a fellow health worker or another person seeing it. So I think the issue is to educate enough people to understand what are the systems available for them and what the laws can do for them. Yeah.
No, that is absolutely fantastic. I'm taking notes. Reason being, my mother had a case where a former of the place sold land and that my father left because she became a widow. And
Yeah.
she had to go to court and we did get that person arrested, but it was a process. And I didn't know that you could sue, you could ask for compensation. So,
Yes.
so for me personally, that's why I was saying this is very personal to us. This information is something that we're not all aware of. And
Yes.
we need to disseminate this information because if even the great book says, my people die for the lack of knowledge, we
Knowledge.
are perishing because we don't have knowledge. And the information is there, the systems are there. In Malawi, albeit it's very new, it's starting up, but we need to disseminate this information as widely
Yes.
as possible
Awesome.
so that our elderly are protected in their homes, in their families, in care in environments, whether it's the two nursing homes we have in Malawi, whether it's
Yeah.
in the hospitals, because time and time again, we're seeing these videos that are going viral where elderly people are being, put in the ground alive,
Tortured.
being buried
Mhm.
alive, being burnt, being stripped naked, being raped, and people are taking videos. I mean, those people who are taking those videos, they need to be persecuted.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why are
Yeah.
you sharing that at somebody's most
Yeah.
vulnerable space? But
And actually within the Cyber Crimes Act, that is a crime.
Oh, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Now, can we all hear this online, please? It is a crime. If you're sharing videos where people are being abused, you can be persecuted for that. So thank you very much. Jared, I'm gonna pass on to you. I'm getting very passionate here now.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I exited some groups because of the very same thing, because things that were shared, I couldn't stomach it. Yeah. So really, and people should be reported. It's nothing to celebrate, nothing. It's these are humans. And Judge Ntaba has educated us very well that Ubuntu, the concept of Ubuntu comes from that the human rights, the basic dignity of a person, and to be burnt alive after all they've contributed to society is just sad. It's really sad. The nursing homes that are coming up and opening in Malawi, which is absolutely amazing, it's good. But we know that even here, abuse in the nursing home happens. It's still happening today. So UK is not free from the elder abuse. It's happening in people's home, in the community.
Yeah.
Mostly people who abuse people are close family members, and this will go for long unreported because of love. They love their son, they love their daughter or grandkids, so they'll keep living with it, and it comes in all different forms, just like both our speakers have presented to us. So my question is again to you, Titiwe, because you were a manager at some point of a nursing home, if I recall very well, if my memory serves me well.
Yeah, that's right.
So people, whether it's in a nursing home or at home, they'll say that they were stressed, the carers were stressed. So how do we distinguish carer stress from neglect or abuse? And what support to prevent harm should happen or should be given to prevent harm? Because people say, "Oh, I was just stressed. That's why I just locked my mom in the room and I'm doing God knows what. I'm not taking, as you said, I'm not taking my mom to church because she drives me insane. She's a yeah. Can we
Thank you for that.
distinguish?
Yeah. So it is very difficult, very hard to distinguish between care strain and neglect or abuse. So there are some key elements that you can actually focus on. So it's things like looking at what was the intent and what was the pattern. Is it repeated or it was a one-off? And what's the severity? Is there clear harm or the person is happy, smiling? Or you find that someone's totally withdrawn and totally scared, what is going on with that individual? And then you look at the impact on the individual as well. But when you talk about impact on the individual, when you talk about people with living with dementia, is quite hard because they're not going to tell you, they're not going to show because they lack that ability to express themselves. So you may not clearly see that impact, but the clear message is to understand what clearly constitutes as abuse, what is abuse, what is going on with this carer. So there are two definitions that you look at. When you look at carer strain, you find that people are overwhelmed, but they still remain caring. Whereas when people are abusive, there's clear harm, no care, no remorse, and you can see a repeated behavior and symptoms as well of all sorts of abuse, emotional, financial, or people are coming out in bruises or inappropriate strain or excessive weight loss, unexplained excessive weight loss. So you can see that there's abuse happening here. Whereas if it was a carer strain, someone's losing a lot of weight because they're not eating a lot, or maybe they don't have enough time to look after this individual because they have to look after other responsibilities, or they're just overwhelmed, you find that they will be the first ones to go and raise concern, maybe talk to someone and seek assistance. Whereas in abusive situations, people will just sit there and continue neglecting and abusing this individual because they don't care, they are not concerned. So the second part of your question was, what can we do? Is by just recognizing that silent carer there, because we always look at the individual, at the patient, oh, the patient. You forget that little voice behind that patient, suffering, tired, working day and night, every day, working, especially in people living with dementia, where they are wandering up and down all day, all night. This care is clearly strained. So by putting special systems in place, like maybe even a few hours respite to give them a break. Someone coming in the house, maybe grouping up as family and saying, okay, who maybe do a rota, who is going to look after her or him today while I go to have a nap for 2 hours, because that carer is a human being as well, needs to be looked after. When you look at areas like the UK, there are systems in place where either the carer will come in the house or the carer will go away. So there are systems. So Malawi needs to start looking at these systems to say, what do we do with the facilities we have, with the services that we have? Do we have rehab centers? Do we have respite facilities or respite beds in parts of our hospital where someone just goes? Because sometimes you can put someone in respite care, and if they're not well cared for, even if they've told me to sleep as a primary carer or as a family carer, I'm not going to sleep because I'm so worried that wherever I've left my mom or dad or my uncle or auntie, they are not well cared for. But making sure that the needs of that individual is met, which is similar to home, to give that carer enough adequate rest. And sometimes here we do the financial support for carers. There's a carer allowance, but we don't know in Malawi how far back we are, because like I talked about earlier, to say if a family member is looking after someone, they've stopped going to work, they've stopped doing other income generating activities, that means they'll be broke. So we need to find like a small allowance that they can receive for being a primary carer for this individual to support them. And other areas like creating dementia-friendly activities, care day centers where people can go, where people can congregate and do activities together to stimulate their brains, to make them feel like they're still human, they're still counted as um, important individuals in our communities. So just creating those services, simple and achievable, even if it means for a few hours, where people care, other carers, professional carers are taking away that responsibility from this primary carer, and then letting them just go, maybe even run errands, to go pay bills because they can't take them, even 2 hours to go to church, to go to the mosque. That is important. So yeah, so that is what we can do. And maybe just making sure we are supporting like the work we are doing as Enrich Malawi, to make sure that we are helping those charitable organizations financially so that they can take people like EGAF Care, elderly care facility, takes people on respite. We can maybe enable them, empower them to look after people like this. So I'll talk more about some of the work we are doing in the webinar next week. So I'm not going to preempt too much, but just creating that support system, not forgetting, not neglecting the carer, because if we want to prevent abuse, then we need to look maybe someone very close, like Sarah has said, it does happen in the family. So why is it happening? Asking that question, why? Are they tired? Don't they have knowledge and skills? Is it too much for them? Is it financial?
Yeah. I
Yes,
think
so
Yeah.
there is like looking at the root cause, what is going on in this family.
Mm.
yeah, and also, from that conversation, what I'm hearing is also the stigma that's attached to letting go of your loved one, to say, oh, I think I've reached a stage where I should put them in a nursing home, or where I should seek support, whether it's from neighbors or
Yeah,
from cousins or from family, extended family, because in Malawi we live we still very much live as a community.
yeah,
So there's that pride that they don't want to seek or reach out for that support, because it's always about um what do they say in Chichewa, and anti Samala, what will they talk about me?
Yeah.
What will they say if I do that? I'm not looking after my parents. Um, I've got this duty of care. So people really just keep soldiering on and soldiering on.
That's true.
But I just wanted as well to look at capacity,
Mm,
because dementia doesn't mean that the person lacks capacity.
mm,
And we know very well from living here, but also I'm sure, from the law side, the legal side, Zione, that capacity is decision specific and can fluctuate. So sometimes people with dementia are not protected. How do we protect someone with dementia while still respecting their autonomy, dignity, and the right to make choices?
And I think that's where legal, social, medical must meet.
Mm,
Because you're right, there are certain aspects of life, even with where you have dementia, you're able to make decisions about yourself,
mhm,
whether it's the kind of clothes you want to eat, the where the kind
mhm,
of the food you want to eat. That might be easier than the decisions that go regarding health, for instance,
mhm.
depending at the level of dementia you're at.
Yeah.
And so it's the way we deal with dementia is the way we should deal with the concept of disability of a person with a mental disability, which is the reason what reasonable accommodations can be made within their capacity to actually ensure they make the decisions by themselves or are assisted to make that decision. Now, that is for you that work in the medical space, or for me that work in the legal space, it's not always as easy as it sounds, because
Mm,
there's so many dichotomies, issues that have to come into play to in order for you to get to that level.
mm,
But it is very important that people are actually capacity to understand what that means. So, as you're saying, medical professionals need to be taught this. Social workers need to be able to be taught this. Families need to understand what it means when you say power of attorney,
mm.
and
mm,
to what extent that power of attorney goes through, because it
mhm.
might not be to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And even if you have power of attorney, does that mean you can abuse that power of attorney? And what happens when you abuse that power of attorney? Or
Mm,
what happens when you abuse the authority that you've been given to make decisions for this person? So
Yes.
it is, when it comes to capacity and the way we deal with persons that are elderly, is to ensure that they're still given the reasonable accommodation to still be able to make the decisions by themselves as much as possible, and then only put into place certain aspects of the decisions where their capacity has seriously diminished to the extent that they're not able to make those decisions. But that is both, as I said, a legal and a medical question that
mm,
needs to be resolved
mm,
within that particular space. Yes.
Yeah.
I
I
I
think
think
I
mhm.
can just add on that as well. That's very true.
mm,
Is that corroboration, because there's a lot at play when you talk about capacity and best interest decisions and
mm,
power
Mm.
of attorney. So all that need to be understood to say what's your role. But looking at also introducing systems like us as healthcare professionals to look at what is advanced care planning. Can people say or express their wishes while they still can, while they're still able to? Are they given that chance to say, do you know what? I always say to my daughter, please, when I die, can you at least put some lipstick? Don't let me go without some lipstick on. And they always laugh. But it's a wish, it's a preference. And
mm,
some people say, please, when I get so unwell and I can't express myself, can you not let me be looked after by a male carer?
mm.
Or when I go, can I wear this dress? So all that is what matters to the individual, addressing that question, what matters to you? That question is important. What matters to you as an individual? What matters to you when you go into hospital? What matters to you when you die? So addressing that question, what matters, is very, very important.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just gonna
Mm,
say, I'm looking at the time. I think what we've
Oh,
done today, we have literally scratched the surface and opened a plethora of possible conversations that we could have and continue to have. But that is what we wanted to do today. It's just to have this conversation. Let's start this conversation. Let's face it head on. We know there's a problem. They are things that are happening in silos. So things that people are doing on an individual level, grassroots, to be able to tackle this problem. Things that you're doing in the legal framework, Justice Zione, things that we're trying to do within the healthcare framework. But how are we joining up together? And Tiziwa talked about being collaborative. We need to work collaboratively across the different systems. And Charity keeps on hammering at us about systems thinking and systems working. And the only way that can happen is when we come together and start having these conversations. And then we ask that question, so what? How do we then work together? And I think I'm only going to have one last question that I'm going to ask the both of you. If before we start, we wrap up, and I'll let Charity do the wrapping up. If you could prioritize one or two key actions that Malawi must take right now, to ensure older people live with dignity and safety, what would they be? I will start with you, Justice Zione Ntaba. Now I'm saying your full name.
Yes. Mine would be the stereotype and the bias rethinking around people that are elderly. I think we need to really, really, really prioritize that. Because as long as we don't do that, we continue to have women, especially women. And I'm not saying that men don't get abused a lot when it comes to elderly abuse, but women get abused a lot. Whether they are murdered, whether they're beaten up, whether they raped, you find that it's a lot more women. So we need to work around those stereotypes and those biases, especially the cultural ones and the harmful practices, the religious ones that are coming through. We need to really work on that. The second one would be to inculcate in our health and our health systems, as you're saying, all these particular guidelines that deal with abuse for the elderly, and also in terms of just care. What kind of care do they need when they come into the system? Because it's very different from me, who's able to advocate for myself. Although I'm now creaking and in spaces, but I'm able to respond to certain things, but the kind of care. So the older person's access, there should be certain guidelines, minimum guidelines that should cut across. Those need to be in place. Those need to be put in. And we need to have the law. Everybody needs to know what the law says about it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So
What
three.
about you? Yeah, three. Tidziwe, same question.
Yeah.
What two things do you think Malawi needs to do right now to safeguard our elderly people?
Yeah, it's as I said, it's awareness, that education, going deeper, not just saying, oh, this is abusive, but what constitutes abuse. So that education, and where does that education start from? So establishing those systems from primary school until the highest level of education, every curriculum needs to understand care of the older adults, why is important. As I can give an example, I think some of you have seen messages on social media where people were comparing why should we help charities that deal with younger children or those that deal with older people. So us who deal with older people, we were criticized because they say, oh, but they've done their part, they're not important, let's look after the leaders of tomorrow. But they're forgetting that for us to exist is because of these older people. And as Judge Ntaba is saying, we are all going towards there. So if you say an older person is not important, where are we? Where are we going to end? Is that the way we want to be looked after when we age? So it's asking that question and starting establishing those systems and creating that support network for those who are beginning to establish these care facilities in Malawi. Let's rally behind them and support them to make sure that care of the older adult becomes a big thing in Malawi, because we'll all end up there. Our parents will end up there. Our brothers, relatives will end up there. So I think it's an area that is very neglected, but yet very important.
Thank you so much to both Judge Ntaba and to Ziwe. You guys have been absolutely phenomenal. You have opened our eyes, you have opened our minds, you have challenged our way of thinking regarding elderly people within our community. Before I close off, I'll let Charity just sum up what we've discussed today because I know Charity wants Amakonda Ndondo Mego ta 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 ta. Yeah, a president, yeah, Tracy.
Yeah.
Charity, I'll just give you the floor before
No,
we close.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, both, and to our listeners who are listening live to us on this podcast. But I also want to acknowledge the question that's been posted in the chat, which is a challenge to us all in terms of policy, but also in terms of education, and how can we advocate that this should be embedded right from when kids are starting school or when they're even in nursery, so that it should become second nature. And I think there's power to that question in terms of education, because education is the root of everything. So, as we bring this important conversation to a close, I just wanted to thank you both. I for shining a light on this important issue that's often hidden, minimized, and sometimes not spoken. So you have reminded us today that elder abuse is not just an individual or family or a health issue, but it's also a important legal, a human rights issue. We all have a right to life. And we have the community, we as a community have got that responsibility. So for unpacking the legal side of this, Judge Zione, so thank you so much. Our elders are not burdens. They are giants who we stand on. For us to reach this far, it's because of our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, for those who are lucky to have them now. So they are leaders, they are storytellers, they are custodians of wisdom. They've carried all of us, shaped our communities, our identity. They deserve kindness and they deserve dignity, safety, protection. So I was reflecting on what Judge Zione said about the bias, but also we see it even in the West when it comes to the uh, bias against women. We see it often, and to hear that the elders are being killed in Malawi beliefs, for beliefs sometimes out of people being selfish. And there are lots of femicide, and I think it's something that I would be interested to do, probably to look at some point, to look at femicide, why it keeps happening. More so in Malawi, because when I was hearing what you were sharing, Sarah, that there's some nurses probably who have left UK or left countries that they were and gone back to Malawi, and then they get killed. So, and mostly with members of their family. So there's femicide that's still happening. So our elders deserve, as I said, they deserve dignity, safety, justice. And for us as a Moon, our message is clear. We need to respect our elders and we have to move beyond culture, and it's got to be action. So we need to listen to our older people when they speak. We need to protect them. We need to check on them. We need to make sure that they don't feel isolated. And our message to people who are participating in the pack psychology or mob justice, you will be prosecuted. The law is coming. And if it's a brother, if it's a cousin, if it's a sister who is just watching and filming, please be that kind one to stop this from happening. So we need to act to challenge neglect, financial exploitation, harmful practices, silence, dignity. And I'm hoping that this conversation should not end here. I'm hoping that it will continue in our homes, in our churches, in our communities, in our workplaces, professional spaces, and most importantly, in our policy discussions. So whether we are in Malawi or in the UK or in the diaspora, we have a responsibility to ask our elders safe. Are they respected? Are they truly being cared for? Because tomorrow, you, my friend, me, it will be us. So let this podcast be more than an awareness. It should be a call to conscience and a call to action. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for joining Mona as we continue this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. And PAKACHERE, as from PAKACHERE, tukunena tizikumo kwambiri mwakhala nafe lero tathokoza. To our listeners here in the UK, our listeners in Malawi, and other listeners in diaspora, thank you for being with us today. And tizakumanaso PAKACHERE next time. We will see you under the Kachere tree. Tizikumo kwambiri, and have a good night. Thank you, everyone.
You.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Please, bye.
Bye.
Maine, zaimba chakulani, zaimba chakula.